Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about the nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 118, Homework. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. Even though she and Maxwell are engaged and Maxwell ceased providing her weekly paycheck, Fran wants to contribute to the household. So when Maxwell is having trouble locating a star for his forthcoming rap musical, Fran jumps when Sammy asks if she can help his grandson find work as a rapper on Broadway. The only problem? Irwin is a gift wrapper, not a musical rapper, which becomes apparent once he arrives at the Sheffield home. Fran, afraid that Maxwell will take back her engagement ring and cancel their engagement, helps Irwin transform into the rapper she imagined. After Maxwell's investor was impressed by Irwin, and with the wedding plans coming along, Fran seems to be becoming Maxwell's partner both domestically and professionally, leaving Cece without a role, causing her to have a psychotic break, which necessitates her, shall we say, involuntary hospitalization. Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
I do not.
All right, would you like to take us to scene one?
Yes, so we open up in the kitchen. Gracie and Niles are actually in the middle of arm wrestling. Fran comes down the side, like the back stairs, and she's actually wearing a robe and her hair is up in a towel. And of course, she's asking like what they're doing. And apparently, they're arm wrestling to see who will get Fran's room. And Fran points out that, Gracie's only a little girl. And Gracie immediately goes, "You're hurting me." And Niles, of course, is like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And then immediately, Gracie slams down Niles's arm, to which, Niles says, "Ow." And Gracie says, "Sucker." But anyway, Fran is like, "Okay, well, and in the meantime, where am I supposed to, be?" And Gracie points out to Fran that, they're engaged. When she gets married, she's going to be moving in with Maxwell into his room.
Right.
And Fran's like, "Oh, this is getting better and better."
Right.
At this point, Maxwell walks in from the swinging kitchen door, and he's looking down. Is it a newspaper or some other papers in his hand?
Yeah.
And Fran greets him about, "Oh, there's my adorable new roommate," and they kiss. And Maxwell says, "Morning, darling." And then Fran goes on to say, "Well, sweetie, last night you didn't give me that little something that I'm used to getting from you every week." And Maxwell's like, "Oh, Fran, since you got engaged, I didn't think I had to give it, to you anymore." And Fran's like, "Wait a minute. I know what I'm talking about. What are you talking about?" And Maxwell says, "Your paycheck." And Fran's like, "Oh, thank God. That's what I'm talking about too." Again, side note, as a child, we wouldn't have picked up on that necessarily, right? That innuendo. Uh,
Correct.
but Fran's like, "But honey, even though we're getting married, I still want to work. We have always been a two-income family." And Maxwell's like, "Yes, dear, but your income always came out of my income." And
Mhm.
Fran goes on to say, "Well, I still wanna have a career, I don't wanna be one of those women who just, I don't wanna be a wife who just sits around having lunch with the girls, shopping, getting hair done. Well, I can try it for a couple of weeks." Because she kind of picked up on, actually, that doesn't sound quite so bad, right?
Mhm.
And that is the opening scene. Do you have anything to add?
I do not.
Okay, can you take us to the office?
Sure. So we're in the office with Maxwell and Cece, and Maxwell has some papers in his hands, and he says to Cece that he's going through the wedding responses. And well, I see you've only RSVP'd for one. Are you sure you don't want to bring a guest? And Cece looks up from whatever's in her hands and is like, "Well, I thought I might go with you. Is that inappropriate?" And Maxwell's like, "Well, I am marrying Fran. I thought I might sit with her." And Cece's like, "Oh, of course. You think I'm serious? Can I catch a ride with you guys?" And
Mhm.
at which point Fran comes in saying to Maxwell, because they are on a first name basis at this point, "Maxwell, I have two very important things to talk to you about the wedding." And she walks around the desk and he takes her in his arm, and he says, well, I say we honeymoon in the Caribbean and we don't leave our suite for 36 hours. And Fran's like, wow, I was thinking kishka or potato, but your way's good too. And Cece's like, Maxwell, we don't get off this damn wedding. We are on a deadline for this musical. Maybe we should just cancel it. And Max was like, well, Cece, we have investors we have to answer to. And she's like, oh, I meant the wedding. And
Mhm.
Max was like, well, Cece, I'm a little concerned about this whole idea of us producing an urban rap musical in the first place. I mean, we're not exactly cutting edge, are we? And Fran's like, oh, come on. Who's more cutting edge than you? Who is the one who thought of putting Charles Nelson Riley and Rip Taylor in love letters? Um, and Cece is obviously not thrilled by anything that she has now witnessed. And she says, Nanny, fine, we have work to do. Now, he may belong to you in every other room in this house, but in this room, he is mine. And he's obviously holding Fran. I believe he kisses her and he tells Cece to give them a minute. Cece's like, okay, and walks outside.
Mhm. Yep. So then we move on to what looks to be a wedding venue,
Mm-hmm.
and Sylvia and Fran are there, and there's like a display cake, I would assume, out there that Sylvia has picked up a rosette from, and Fran's chiding her like, put that down, it's plaster. You don't want to scrape your esophagus again, do you? And that's when, Dirk, the wedding coordinator, comes in. He declares, oh, it's going to be the wedding of the century. And Sylvia's like, yeah, it took nearly that long to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And Brandon's explaining to Dirk that ours is a mixed wedding or mixed marriage. He's from drinkers, we're from eaters. So let's plan the menu accordingly.
Correct.
And Dirk's like, oh, fun, 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 funny, fun, fun. Uh, and then um, he starts suggesting, maybe when the guests arrive, there's an ice sculpture of the Trevi fountain. And friends like, ooh, can you make that out of chopped liver? And he's like, oh, that's a challenge. Um, but anyway, he talks about how, they have 75 hors d'oeuvres. Like, do you want to taste or will you trust? And immediately, Fran and Sylvia are like, taste, of
Yep.
course. And he calls out to someone, he clears his throat because, it's a bit overwhelming, I think, for him probably. And he's calling out for an assistant who's not there. And he makes the comment, it's like he's Regis without Kelly or Kathy Lee.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then anyway, as soon as Dirk leaves, Fran and Sylvia are sitting down. Fran says, she has a conundrum, because Maxwell doesn't want her to work anymore. And Sylvia's like, and the conundrum would be
Right.
and then Fran kind of talks about how, well, actually, she'll be spending so much time doing her wifely duties that has been stored up for 5 years. So who will have energy? But again, she emphasizes she still wants to contribute like to the household. And Sylvia starts telling her, well, you're his partner and in life, the woman behind him, and you should never refuse him.
Never.
And never. And you know what I mean. And she goes, yeah, dinner. And then Sylvia's like, what else is there? So anyway, Dirk comes back and he has a platter that he's like setting down, and he's like, oh, may I be so bold as to ask about releasing of the doves? And Sylvia's like, no doves, there's no meat on them.
Yep.
So yeah. Anything you want to add to that scene?
No.
Okay. Can you take us to the next one?
Sure. So we're back at the Sheffield home and we're, walking in to they're in the Sheffield home, they're walking through the house that like they've just come in, and Sylvia has the book that's supposed to be the wedding menu, and she's like, you call this a wedding menu? And she says, ceviche, sashimi, squid. Who the heck is this chef? Jules Verne? And Fran's like, oh, and the seating plan is a nightmare. I've got a lord and a lady and a countess sitting next to a cookie and Izzy and a schmooey.
Mhm.
And sitting on the couch are Sammy and Yetta. So they are told that we're back and we're leaving in an hour. So Sylvia tells them, so start putting on your coats now. And
Mhm.
Sammy gets Fran's attention and he says, before we hit the road, I have a favor to ask you. Do you think Mr. Sheffield could get my grandson a job on Broadway? And Fran's like, oh, I don't know, Sammy. I mean, I really don't like to interfere in Maxwell's business. Everyone in the room says, since when?
Yep.
And Fran's like, since I got a lot more than $6 an hour to lose. And Sammy pleads, well, he's a brilliant rapper, a great artist. Last December, he rapped for Puff Daddy.
Mhm.
Like, a brilliant rap artist. Mom, come here. Did you hear that? This is my opportunity. Maxwell's producing a rap musical. It's all about violent gangs that fight in the street and every so often stop to sing poignantly about it. And Sylvia's like, well, darling, here's your chance. What are you waiting for? Now you can be the woman behind the man. You know, where would your father be today if I hadn't pushed him? And Friends like, not collecting disability? Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Do you have anything you want to add?
No.
Would you like to take us
We
to the office then?
Okay, yeah. So we go to Maxwell's office. Maxwell's on the phone and he's telling the person on the other line, "Oh, we found the perfect star, talented, dynamic. You can see him Tuesday night." And Cece comes in and Maxwell puts, his hand over the receiver and asks, if she found anyone and she's like, "No." So he changes it to Wednesday night.
Mhm.
Um and then hangs up and Cece is back to her ways, pointing out to Maxwell, he needs a break. Why don't they rent a yacht and sail down to St. Bart's? And uh, Maxwell points out that's where he and Fran are going for their honeymoon. And, Cece's a little snipey, like, oh, Miss Special gets to do everything.
Mhm.
Um, anyway, Fran comes in and mentions that, she has someone. And again, of course, it's a relative, and Cece is pointing out, like, no one wants to hear, your relatives sing, much less talk or vice versa, whatever the
No one wants to hear your relatives speak, let alone
Yeah.
sing.
Yes. And Maxwell too doesn't seem too keen on it to the point where Fran's like, "Are you patronizing me?" Because he's again being kind of lovey-dovey to her, trying to let her down.
Gently.
But
Yeah.
then you know, she mentions, you know, it's she mentions the name Irwin, and she does point out something about how because she name dropped some like Mary Martin. What exactly was that little piece? Do you recall,
Yeah.
Debbie?
She says to him, um, so Fran says that my guy Erwin rapped with Puff Daddy. Really? That's right. He turned us down. He didn't think we were hip enough for him.
Oh, okay.
And Fran's like, don't tell me you bored him with that Mary Martin trivia. And
Yeah,
Maxwell tries to defend himself by saying something like, well, a lot of people don't know that she's Larry Hagman's mother. And
yeah.
then you
And
want to
then
say,
Cece's again points out that, their whole entire professional kind of thing is hanging on a woman who thinks the importance of being earnest is a sequel to Earnest, Scared, Stupid.
yep,
And, and Cece once again is trying to claim her territory with Maxwell because she's like, business is my turf, you know? And, but basically, once again, Maxwell kind of dismisses her and she acquiesces, right?
yeah,
She tries to put a foot down and then is like, okay. She goes out. I kind of counted this as one continuous. Did you
yeah, that's
into the
fine.
hallway?
Yeah,
Okay. Because again, she goes out into the hallway and of course Niles is there.
of course.
And um and Niles is like, "Oh, are you still upset about the wedding?" And he goes over to a little side table where there's a vase and he picks up the bouquet and it's like, "Single girls gather around," and he throws it over his shoulder and of course she catches it. And CC goes, "Well, I still have a chance, as long as I'm his business partner and I'm here every single day." She's still holding on very tightly. and and Niles is like, "Oh, yeah, it's not like after Yoko married John that the Beatles broke up or something along those lines. So she doesn't seem too pleased at that thought. Do you have anything to add to that scene?
No.
Okay. Can you take us to the living room?
Yeah. So I think Maggie comes in and she asks Fran something like, I know it's last minute, but could I bring a date to the wedding? He's really cute. And Fran's like, does he have a brother? So that's out of her mouth before she could even stop herself. Force of habit. Gotta stop
Mm,
that. Sure, sweetie. And so then the doorbell rings and Fran's like, oh, well, that's Sammy's grandson, the future star of your father's new musical, thanks to me. And she's like running to the door, but I don't want to toot my own horn. She opens the door. Hi, Sammy. I didn't know you were coming. And Sammy is like, well, somebody had to drive Irwin. Fran's like,
mhm,
well, where is he? And then in walks Irwin. Um, I think it's important to describe him.
mhm. Yep.
Irwin is not what you would imagine um, if he was a famous rap artist. Um, Instead, he looks like a nerd, shall we say.
Like the stereotypical nerd from like the 80s with a pocket protector.
Pocket protector, and he's wearing glasses with a piece of tape over the nose, the bridge on the nose. Um, he's wearing a button down and a jacket, and yeah. Yeah. Do you want to add anything to the description of Irwin?
Nope.
And so he says, hi, I'm Irwin. And Fran says, hi, I'm scared. Do you
Mhm.
always dress that way to sing, or were you just audited? And Irwin's like, I don't sing, and I don't make enough to get audited. Fran's like, what do
Mhm.
you mean you don't sing? Your grandfather told me that you were a great rapper. And he's like, I'm the bet. You got scotch tape, paper, and ribbon. You're a gift rapper? And Fran's like,
Mhm.
Sammy, why did you tell me that he rapped for Puff Daddy? Well, he did last Christmas. And so Irwin chimes in, Puff likes lots of bows and those little plastic Santas. And Frank cuts him off. Who cares? Why did you tell your grandfather that you wanted to work on Broadway? And he's like, well, I live on 8th Avenue. I figured I could just walk. And Fran's
Mhm.
like, do you realize that Mr. Sheffield has one of the most important composers on Broadway coming here to listen to a gift wrapper from Crate and Barrel? And Irwin takes offense to that. Pottery Barn. We were first. And Fran's like, oh, it's not like the time that I screwed up. I mean, what's he gonna do? Take back the ring? Give me something salty. I'll bloat. He'll never get this ring off.
Mhm.
Irwin's like, well, maybe I don't want to ruin everything for you, but maybe this is a blessing in disguise. I don't want to be a gift wrapper all my life. Maybe I do have some talent. My granddaddy plays the piano and he sings great. And Sammy's like, oh, stop, you're making me blush. And Irwin's like, well, let me try. And Friend's like, okay, well, what have I got to lose? Try really hard. And so he starts singing Home on the Range.
Mhm.
And Maxwell walks in. Who's that? Irwin, Fran says, not realizing the consequences of her admission. Miss
Yep.
Fine, says Maxwell. Mr. Sheffield, you know what? I was just thinking rap is dead. And Maxwell's like, what are you talking about? It's the hottest thing on Broadway. And Fran's like, oh, then it must be me that's dead. And he's like, would you excuse us a minute, please? And he says to Fran, I want to see you in my office. And as he's pulling her out of the room, she says, get something salty pretzels. And
Mhm.
says to Irwin, wait till you meet the mother. Did you know
Mhm.
that was one scene? Because I did.
Yeah, I counted it as one scene.
Okay. And so now Fran and Maxwell are in the office, and Maxwell's like, I have a very important composer coming to this house in less than 24 hours. Expect him to meet Puff Daddy's protege. Fran's like, well, I never said protege. That was your embellishment. Bye. And he's like, Miss Fine. She's like, you're calling me Miss Fine? That can't be good. And he's like, it's not. Trust me. And then he's like, well, why did I listen to you? Why did I think things were going to be different just because we got engaged? And Fran's like, well, first of all, we are still engaged, aren't we? And then she continues, now, home on the range happens to be a very complicated number. That does not mean he isn't an excellent rapper. So, and he's like sitting at his desk and she puts her hands in his hair. So why don't you stop adding gray to that beautiful head of hair of yours? Does he rap? You're not patronizing me? And I kid you not, she says, no, baby, no. I can look you straight in the eyes and say Irwin's one professional rapper. Cece has walked in and chimes in, yes, a gift wrapper for Crate and Barrel. Max was like, is that true? And Fran's like, no, it's not. It's Pottery Barn. They were first.
Mm-hmm. And then she
Well,
runs.
yeah. Then she bolts, trying to get the heck out of there.
Mm-hmm. And Maxwell follows.
Yeah.
So then like we pick up in the kitchen. Niles is already there, and Fran is obviously sneaking around, and she asks Niles if he's seen Mr. Sheffield. Um,
Which is
but
interesting. She's calling him Mr. Sheffield.
yes, and she says that she's never seen him so upset. Actually, no, today she hasn't. She has seen him this upset before, but anyway, Niles informs Fran that he's not speaking to her. Why? You have ruined our wedding. And he laments how he's the only butler in the park who doesn't have like wedding photos to like share. And, Fran points out that, she hasn't had those wedding pictures either. But Niles has apparently beat Gracie in playing hoops. So he really wants Fran's old room.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so basically, Niles is telling Fran like she needs to like make it happen, essentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Fran's like, "Oh, what's up, Erwin? Time to get bomb diggity?"
Yup.
Right? And then we enter like a montage of like Fran trying to um essentially make Erwin into a rapper, and she first tries by like correlating the movements he makes for rapping like like gifs to
Mm-hmm.
like having some groove while rapping. And then of course like she needs to like change his style, so she ends up braiding his hair. And then Yetta walks by in a full outfit of like Tommy Hilfiger, but like kind of the athletic, well, like the puffy kind of jacket look.
Yeah.
And so Fran sees that and is inspired. So next we see Erwin wearing that outfit and Yetta's wrapped up in a blanket.
Yup.
Yeah. Essentially, it's a montage of Fran trying to get Erwin ready to be a really great rapper. Do you have anything to add to that?
I do not.
Okay, you
Um,
take it to the office.
so I am not going to rap. Um, we, we see Maxwell. I think Cece's there also, and we have clearly the investor and a possible rapper who's performing for him. And when the guy is done, Maxwell thanks him and says, excellent, really, truly excellent. Well, I'll be getting in touch with your posse.
Hmm.
Needless to say, even though the guy seemed to be a perfectly fine rapper, the investor was not happy. He says, no, why can't I express to you what I'm looking for? It's in the rhythm, Max, the rhythm. You see, I see things in geometric shapes. And he grabs like the file folder that Cece was holding, and he starts drawing things. I see things in geometric shapes. This is what I want. And he's drawn basically like a rectangular face guy with glasses and pointy hair. And he's like, bring me this guy. And Max was like, can't get him. He's in ragtime. And so the
Hmm.
investor's like, so is that it? Is that all of them? What about the guy you hyped on the phone? And Max is like, oh, well, he turned out to be a bust. And Cece chimes in. He was discovered by Maxwell's nanny slash fiance slash back to nanny again. And Max is like, listen, Ty, if you can see your way to give us a few more days, I know there has to be another him pointing at the drawing in this town. And Ty's like, I'm sorry, Max, but I don't think we're on the same page. And then we hear music coming from the living room, and they walk out, and there's Erwin rapping, and Fran and Niles are dancing in the background. And again, I'm not going to do it. Um,
Hmm.
but when he finishes, you know, um, Ty is clearly impressed. The guy's great. What were you doing? Saving the best for last? And Fran's like, yes, he was, because that's his style. Slow to the point of madness, and then he proposes.
Mm-hmm.
So Maxwell leads Ty back into the office and talk business. And he says to Fran, why don't you bring Erwin along? And Fran's like, okay, Erwin. And Erwin's like, oh, I'm so excited, Fran. This is so fat, Fran. And Fran's like, Erwin, I know that fat is a good thing, but please don't say it so near to my name. And so
Mm-hmm.
they walk out of the living room into the office. The door closes, and Niles and Cece are still there. And Cece says to Niles, well, I guess I know where I stand. Outside the door. Well, at least it's over. The pain, the degradation, the shame.
Mm-hmm.
I'm frightened. I don't want to be alone. And Niles looks at her. Well, you finally went crackers. And he like, I think he leads her to sit down on the couch, and he picks up the phone and he dials a number. Yes, hello, Dr. Bork. This is Niles. Yes, it's about Miss Babcock. Yes, I think we have a little problem. She's behaving in a very strange way. Well, I wouldn't call it delusional. And then Cece's like, Grandmama, is that you? Niles is like, yes, child. Back to the phone. Maybe I would. He hangs up the phone and starts pulling her. Come along,
Mm-hmm.
leading her towards the door.
Yep. And then we see kind of the consequences of this because we are next in the kitchen. And Chester's with the family, and um, apparently they're gonna have Chester until Mrs. Babcock is released. I mean, gets home from vacation. Gracie, though, knows what's going on, right? But Fran points out that it's interesting how like happy Chipper, like Chester is, because usually when pets are missing their master, they're depressed and walk around whimpering. And then in comes Niles from the swinging door, and he's depressed. You can tell he's like slumped as he's walking slowly. And he just goes, "Hey." I love that implication. Do you have anything to add to that?
I do not.
Okay. And then the final scene.
So Fran is in the living room with Sammy and Yetta, and Sammy, uh, Yetta says that Sammy has a niece who wants to sing at your wedding. And Fran's like, I'm sorry, Sammy, but Maxwell has a new policy: no more relatives. And Sammy was on the phone, and you hear him say into the phone, okay, Aretha. She said no, hangs up. And Fran had started to walk away, comes back, Aretha, call her back. You want her? Asks Sammy. She's like, yes, wait till Maxwell hears. And she runs out the door. And so Sammy picks up the phone, redials DMV, Aretha Jones, please.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the episode.
That is the episode. Do you have anything you want to talk about generally?
I don't think so. How about you?
Nope. Shall we just jump into favorite fashion then?
I think we should. There was not really anything I particularly liked in this episode. How about
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There wasn't really a favorite outfit. There was an outfit that like stood out in terms of like that black one with like would you call it, it was sparkly, but it was like in the shape of like a question mark in the middle
you?
whenever she had the jacket on. And then without it, you also saw like a peace sign and stuff like that. And at first, when I just saw like the question mark, I was like, is this kind of like a reference to the Riddler? Like, it wasn't necessarily, my my taste. How
Mm-hmm.
about you?
Not mine either.
Hmm. Anything stick out to you?
I mean, there's the puffer jacket suit that Yetta was wearing that Irwin then puts on, which to me seemed very dated.
Very 90s.
Yeah. Uh,
Yep.
that that was the only thing that really stuck out. I didn't really like what Fran was wearing um in that scene with Irwin. It's like the pleather black skirt and the pleather black and red. Um,
Hmm.
oh, I guess there's also red on the skirt. But it's like a matching suit that's black with red and I guess white streaks. I don't know. I didn't care for that. And she's wearing her flat hair
Yeah.
wig.
Well, and this was something I was going to ask you. Did it appear to you that there's some type of weird time skip with that? Because she is not wearing that whenever she and Niles has have that conversation um about she'll need to get Irwin ready. And at that point, I believe they only had like 24 hours. I don't know. I guess she must have started the next day. Bless you.
Thank you. Thank you. Um, yeah, that is weird. I didn't think of it, but you're right.
Anyway. But yeah. Anything else or shall we get into notable New Yorkers?
Let's jump into notable New Yorkers.
Okay. I know there's a couple of like just references throughout. Um, do we want to wait until later or shall we say who Irwin is?
Um,
We can wait if you want.
Up to you.
Okay. Well, okay. So in the first scene, we don't really have anything. Did you have anything?
No. I think mine
Okay.
would start in the second scene.
Yeah, because that's when we get the whole Charles Nelson Riley.
Yep, that he was an American director, drama teacher, comedian, and actor known for roles on Broadway, in film, and on television, including Hello Dolly, Bye Bye Birdie, and The Match Game. That's
And
according
then
to Wikipedia.
and then Rip Taylor.
She was an American. Rip Taylor was an American comedian and actor known for flamboyant personality and for showering others with confetti. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
And then Love Letters.
A 1983 movie about, and I quote, love and obsession, end quote, involving a radio host who follows in her recently deceased mother's footsteps by engaging in an affair with a married man. That's according to our friends at imdb.com.
hmm did you put the Trevi Fountain down?
It did. It's the largest Baroque fountain in Rome, according to our friends at Wikipedia.
And then I feel like we may have talked about Regis and Kathy Lee before. Did or have we not?
Sure, but the reference that was made was Regis without Kathy Lee. That's a reference to the morning show, which was later renamed Live with Regis and Kathy Lee for 15 years. It was a program that aired for 15 years, starting in 1985. That's according to our friends at etonline.com.
hmm And then Jules Verne.
Jules Verne, we have talked about before, I believe. Um, yes, we discussed him previously. He wrote 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
hmm Puff Daddy.
Born Sean Combs, an American rapper, record executive, and record producer. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
hmm Yeah, and has some stuff going on right now. Anyway, um, Mary Martin.
We've discussed her previously.
Larry
Hagman,
Hagman.
an American actor, director, and producer known best for his roles on I Dream of Jeannie and Dallas. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
The Importance of Being Earnest.
It's a play by Oscar Wilde.
hmm And then Ernest Scared Stupid.
Not a play by Oscar Wilde.
Yep.
Instead, it's a 1991 children's movie about an ugly troll that turns children into wooden dolls. That's according to our friends at at IMDb.
Yeah, and then I'm pretty sure we've talked about the Beatles before,
Yeah,
probably Yoko and John specifically, or maybe not. I don't know. It's
I don't know,
been several years.
but I did note that the reference was Yoko married John. Did that break up the Beatles? And the comment was Yoko Ono did marry John Lennon, which did in fact break up the Beatles, which was a
Mhm.
popular band.
Yep. Um, so we can finally identify who Irwin actually is.
Coolio.
Yep. And
Um,
in fact, like that's like he looks like himself later. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. According to our friends at IMDb, Coolio was an actor composer who had over 17 million records sold worldwide. He'd won Grammy Awards and was a multi-platinum record artist. He was born in 1963 and passed away in 2022.
Oh, I didn't realize he passed away. Oh.
Yeah.
Um, now just we've already talked about who plays Sammy before, but just for as a reminder to our listeners, who is Sammy?
Ray Charles.
Yep. And so the fact that he's like, "Oh, somebody had to drive him here."
Yup.
Anyway, Crate and Barrel and Pottery Barn.
Crate and Barrel is, and I quote, an international furniture and home decor retail store headquartered in Northbrook, Illinois, which was founded in 1962. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia. And Pottery Barn we have discussed previously.
Mhm. Home on the Range.
That is, according to our friends at Wikipedia, and I quote, classic cowboy song, which is sometimes called the unofficial anthem of the American West.
Mhm.
The lyrics were written as a poem titled My Western Home in 1872 or 1873. However, it is possible it was written earlier than that. It is also the state song of the state of Kansas.
Hmm.
And in 2010, the Western Writers of America chose it as one of its top 100 Western songs of all times.
Interesting.
All of that is according to our friends at Wikipedia.
I mentioned that the outfit that Yetta wears and then Erwin wears is Tommy Hilfiger, but we've probably talked about him before or like that brand before.
I think so.
Um, Ragtime, has that ever come up before?
So it's a musical based on the 1975 novel by the same name, which tells the story of African Americans, upper class suburbanites, and Eastern European immigrants in the United States. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Yep. And then finally, like Fran thinks that Sammy's talking about Aretha Franklin,
Yeah,
not Aretha Jones.
correct. Aretha Franklin was the Queen of Soul, who was twice named the greatest singer of all time by Rolling Stone. Best known for her song Respect. And
Hmm.
that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Did you have anything else?
I did not.
Okay, we did it.
We did.
So now some Yiddish cop.
Sure. So I'm going to start where I usually start. Sylvia references ceviche, sashimi, and squid, which are all likely not kosher. The squid is
Hmm.
especially not kosher because in order for um, seafood to be kosher, it needs to have both fins and scales, and squid has neither.
Hmm. To be fair, they didn't let poor Dirk know that it needed to be
Correct.
kosher. It was divided as eaters and drinkers.
Correct. Yeah. And then the only other thing I had was kishka, which is
Uh-huh.
also known as stuffed derma, which, for the record, for those following along at home, we definitely talked about in season one in the episode um, where I can't remember the name off the top of my head, where the Sheffields get stranded in Flushing. Uh,
Hmm.
Schlepped Away. That's the title of the episode. Schlepped Away. And they are stuck living with the fines while the bridges and airports are closed due to snow. And Brighton is offered stuffed derma, and he's like, "What's a derma?" And the response is skin. And Gracie says skin, and then Fran corrects her and says, "Oh, it's not skin; it's intestine." Um, so yeah, stuffed kishka is known as stuffed derma, which really is stuffed intestine, which uses flour or matzo meal spices and schmaltz. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia. Schmaltz
Okay.
um, is a chicken fat, I believe. So
Okay. Okay. So some 90s nostalgia.
everything having to do with rap in this episode seems dated to me.
In terms of like how they portray it.
How they portray it, how they talk about it. Yeah. So like Fran, as you tried quoting earlier, says, "Was up, Irwin? It's time to get bomb biggity."
Uh-huh. Yep.
Niles responds, "You go, girl." Like all of that sounds so dated to me.
Yep. Well, and also like to be fair, Fran and Niles are definitely not comfortable with the language. Like, I
Ew.
mean, they're very stilted. Um,
Agreed.
but again, like you said, terminology, because also fat PHAT is dated in terms of like using that as a that's so great kind of thing. Um, Go ahead and say your usual though.
Old cars.
Yeah, because we definitely had a scene. I like was like, oh yeah, we definitely see some like cabs here and like some traffic going with the older cars. Um, Now, like you said, like that whole thing with Irwin seems dated. Um, just generally speaking as well, I feel like with how social media is, like having YouTube, all that kind of stuff, I feel like they could have easily looked up Irwin prior to him showing up, right? Um,
Right.
if he had like a YouTube channel or, a SoundCloud or any kind of presence where he's been like uploading his raps, to kind of see whether he was even viable
Uh,
prior to like hyping him up, right?
Agreed. I agree entirely.
Hmm.
I
Any,
also, for the record, I also thought the concept of Fran, like Sylvia's reaction to Fran saying, I have this dilemma that Maxwell doesn't want me to work anymore, like
hmm
that felt very dated to me because
hmm
there, I feel like the majority of married couples now are two income couples.
yeah, I
Um,
think unfortunately, like, okay, I think it's kind of like a cyclical kind of thing though, because there is definitely a portion of society at this point who are trying to go back. Like, there's a whole resurgence of what they term trad wives, which are traditional wives
mhm.
that try to like portray and glorify like the whole stay at home, make from scratch, that kind of stuff, which is like, there's nothing wrong, if that's what you choose to do, right?
Yeah, but
Um,
it's not a
the point
viable
is people
option
should
for,
have a choice. But yeah,
it's
in terms of when she says that she has more than $6 an hour to lose, I'm like, $6 an hour is like, again, today's minimum wage is not much better, but that seems like unthinkable, right? As a
Mhm.
salary, like as a hourly rate.
Right. Agreed.
Hmm. But yeah, so like similarly in that whole conversation where Sylvia's like, never refuse him. And she's referring to dinner, but the first implication
Is not
is
dinner.
something else. And it's like, ooh, Sylvia. That's,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
I think today people acknowledge that there is such a thing as like, you still need consent from your spouse, right?
correct. I mean, I don't, at that point, my guess is at that point, a lot of states had yet to recognize um, marital rape as a crime because that's
Mm.
been a recent uh,
Yeah.
recognition.
Hmm.
So there's that.
Yeah. Yep. Um, Anything else in this category?
I don't have anything else. Do you?
Okay. Nope. So then we can finally update our kiss count.
Woohoo!
Yep, it was 40. You and I briefly discussed we think there were two in this, at least ones that were noticeable. So we are up to 42 and we are five and a half seasons in.
Hmm.
But yeah, uh anything to add on that front, Debbie?
Nope.
Or are we ready for some future fun?
I'm ready for some future fun.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. So let's see, where do I want to start? Um, I want to start with the beginning of the episode where Niles and Gracie are fighting over who's going to get Fran's room. And spoiler, Niles does not get Fran's old room. Uh,
Oh.
doesn't even remember what floor Niles's room is on when she has to go and like talk to him very quickly. She has to follow Maxwell. She even says, "What floor is his room on?" Later, so and before that, I should say, Fran announces to her mother that she plans on turning her old room into a home gym for Maxwell. Um, oh, actually, to her mother and Yetta, saying that, well, the men who marry the fine women tend to die young. Why is that? And Yetta says because they want to. Um,
Aw.
but so Fran, wants to turn her old room into a home gym for Maxwell. But guess what? That doesn't happen. She's like, they walk into Fran's old room and they find Maggie in bed with her new boyfriend.
Ooh.
Yeah. And spoiler, Maxwell walks in while the lovers are still in bed together. So it's great all around for everyone.
Mhm.
So that's part one. Continuing on with the episode in order, Crate and Barrel. Um, in season 6, Brighton takes Yetta to the movies, and somehow they end up getting separated. In trying to find her, Brighton notes that Yetta was asking the Bride of Chucky, like cutout of the Bride of Chucky, a cutout of someone where the Bride of Chucky was registered. And then he was like, Crate and Barrel. And he rushes to go and try to find Yetta. Yeah. And then I guess finally, and unsurprisingly, Irwin is not the last relative that Fran and Maxwell hire. Fran and Maxwell seem to hire Sammy's niece Edna, who's played by Whoopi Goldberg, to do their wedding photography. That said, we do not actually see her at their wedding.
Mhm.
Um, and it's worth noting that Whoopi Goldberg then makes a second appearance on the series, the second time as herself on Hollywood Squares. And maybe not necessarily hiring a relative, but Maxwell ends up producing a musical based on Yetta's old love letters.
Hmm.
And he had to
Cool.
write Andrew Lloyd Webber for them. So,
Nice.
yeah,
Okay. So things to look forward to.
exactly.
I just realized because I mentioned earlier we're like 5.5 seasons in, um, that sooner or later we're gonna be running out on that category or that shtick, right?
Yes, I literally just had that thought, which was then immediately followed by, oh, wait, I had one more. We later find out that Niles visits Cece while she's institutionalized. So,
Okay.
and he does so in a very Niles fashion. Um,
Mhm.
he
Yeah.
he visits her, but she doesn't see him. And instead, he calls to her, if I recall correctly, Maxwell loves Fran. You're gonna die alone.
Oh, wow.
Only way you have to wear a straight jacket to feel a man's arms around you.
Wow, Niles.
And Cece's reaction is, "Oh, you did come and visit me, you old softy." Yeah.
Yeah.
As you can imagine, Cece does not take. Um, she has a mixed reaction to her being institutionalized. Um, to some people, she acknowledges that she needed help, and to others, she contends that she was totally fine and she's going to sue the people who locked her up. So, yeah,
Mhm.
it'll be fun.
It's complicated.
It is
Mhm.
complicated. All right,
Okay.
I am now officially done.
Okay. So then, moving on to episode rating. As a reminder to our lovely listeners, we like to rate each episode from 1 to 5 lipsticks, with 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. But as always, this is just for fun. It's arbitrary. We reserve the right to adjust our ratings at a later date. And this week, I have to go first. um, and again, as Debbie, as you were saying earlier, the entire portrayal and stuff of like the rapping part seemed very dated. And there was one time during the montage when whenever Fran was doing the hair that she lifted up a picture of a white woman with braids as like her inspiration.
Mhm.
Uh and it's like and I'm trying to make sure I knew, isn't it Bo or someone like that who the lady is?
I don't know.
Um, because I know, like, it's, like, right on the tip of my tongue, because it's, like, a pretty famous photo. But again, that just seems, I don't know, kind of, again, going into the cultural appropriation or, like, minimizing, it wasn't very
It
comfortable.
was it wasn't
I
up
don't
to today's standards.
Yeah. Um, so that was kind of like, and then Fran continues with this was compared to other episodes, it was just the don't use fat, near my name. Um, and then, Sylvia's comment that we already talked about. But then on the other hand, when Niles is depressed after Cece's gone, the continual CC Niles dynamic is just, entertaining to watch.
Mhm.
Although, yes, throughout this episode, Cece did kind of unravel a bit. Um,
And
I don't know.
that's because the actress was gonna have her baby. So
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. They needed a way to get her out. um, but then I don't know.
it's hard,
Because
isn't it?
yeah, because again, we see some progress, right? Like we actually see some wedding planning. Um, we
And
fall back a little bit on the Mr. Sheffield Miss Fine when he's upset and chases her.
Mhm.
But we also see them being very lovey-dovey, like, and talking about the future. Uh, I'm just gonna go with a 4.5. I
Okay.
don't know. What are you gonna do?
I don't particularly like this episode. I don't think it's that funny. I suppose you're right. We see some progress with their engagement, but like, I mean, mini spoiler, like they went from 0 to 60 real fast with getting engaged,
Mhm,
and like then their engagement speeds by, but like it also doesn't make a lot of sense. Like in the episode before their actual wedding, I won't get into why, but Sylvia makes the comment that the invitations are halfway to Israel already. But like the next episode is titled "The Wedding Part One." Yeah, it just like the timing doesn't work. Um, I did not care for their backstepping and calling each other Mr. Sheffield and Miss Fine. Um, I I think I'm giving it a 3, and I think
okay.
that's generous because again, I this is not an episode I go out of my way to watch. I did not particularly enjoy rewatching it. It doesn't hold up compared to some of the other episodes, even in this season.
Okay.
So
Can
yeah,
I put mine at a 3.75?
they were allowed to change them even on the same
Even
episode.
even within a minute of saying it.
Exactly. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I don't believe so.
All right, well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next time when we'll be discussing episode 119, The Reunion Show.
If you would like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at a fine time nanny revisited at gmail.com. Have a great week.